dangerously close. This episode is brought to you by William Mitchell Audio. Now, if you've been a long-time listener of this podcast, you know that William Mitchell Audio has been a sponsor and a friend of the show since episode 1. And if you've been paying attention, I've been doing unsanctioned underground wrestling for William Mitchell Audio. But certain members of the California Pizza Kitchen community think they can walk in here and wave some frozen pizzas around and tell me that I have to use all of my creativity for their ad. And that if William Mitchell Audio's ad is more creative than the ad that I do for California Pizza Kitchen, then they want beef. Well, I've got one thing and one thing to say only. Some people want ad creativity. I just want everyone to be happy. California, William Mitchell, audio.com, Pizza Kitchen. Go to williammitchellaudio.com. My guest today is Sam Ray. Sam is an international strategist, writer, and traveler. He grew up in the multicultural San Francisco Bay Area with a liberal teacher, mother, and a conservative stockbroker father, which gave him a natural desire to bridge cultural and political differences. In the 2000s, Sam recognized a friend needed rescuing from a bully, so he studied bullying psychology. He later discovered he had accidentally become an expert in the psychology of narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths when others kept asking for help. Sam went on to write his dream book, Explaining America. What's up, Sam?
Oh, just happy to be here. So
happy to have you here, man. I hope that this wasn't a setup for you to show up and tell me that I actually happen to be a narcissist or a psychopath.
From what I've heard of several shows, you're not even in the ballpark.
All right.
Not that you can tell that easily, but it's usually, yeah. Well, actually, you're definitely not a psychopath because you have real emotions. I can see that on your face. And same as sociopath too, but they are good at faking it. As one of the top experts, Dr. Robert Hare, he's the man who invented the psychopath checklist. He described it as something to the effect of every morning the psychopath wakes up and puts on a mask and says it's showtime. So they are very good at mimicking emotions, but fortunately, with a lot of practice, you can usually see through it.
Is that kind of like the that test that Philip K. Dick invented for Blade Runner? Well, it was for Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, where they test you to see if you're human or not.
Well, that test is probably much better than the psychopath checklist, just because of the voice comp, with that little thing that flips up and monitors your eyes to show the eye reflection or whatever. Blade Runner is actually one of my favorite movies, so you kind of got me there. But it's a list of questions that or it's a checklist actually of certain behavior, certain traits that indicate psychopath. Now, the thing that's really tricky with narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths, the words themselves, is there are many, I don't want to say many interpretations and meanings, but certainly with narcissists, we all have a certain level of narcissism, and there's healthy narcissism and unhealthy narcissism. And when you start getting to unhealthy narcissism, that's in the DSM, which is the psychology kind of Bible, labels that the people who fall under clinical narcissism as cluster B. There's cluster A, for people with schizophrenia or whatever. But anyway, cluster B has histrionic personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, and antisocial personality disorder. And actually, I skipped borderline personality disorder. Now, what got me on this, and as we mentioned, was my friend. And what happened is I had a friend who just kind of disappeared, and they were living a couple states away. And I said, I'm going to go visit my friend because I want to know what the heck's going on. Because why are they disappearing? This is not a shy person. Yeah, exact opposite of a shy person. And I went there, and it was like my friend had PTSD and was just a frazzled version of themselves. And what had happened is they were caught in a sociopath's web. And I didn't know that initially. I don't use that term lightly, but as they started telling me the things that were being told by the sociopath about my friend, I was like, oh my God, these are like the serial killers you hear about on TV. I mean, who could be completely and totally, utterly shameless like that? And I thought I knew a lot about psychology, and I loved Sherlock Holmes. So I thought I knew all about, psychopaths and this and that. I didn't know anything. I was just, it was just almost everything I thought I knew was wrong. And like the first search I did was, I searched on psychopath, and I found this thing that said George W. Bush is a psychopath. And I'm like, that's bullshit. I mean, he's got some issues and I'm not a fan.
There's so much hyperbole with the word psychopath. And I'm sure that I have personally misused the word psychopath literally thousands of times in my life, where somebody's an asshole and I call him a psycho. And is that kind of what you mean too, though? Like when someone's like, yes, George Bush is a psychopath, but really it's just he might be a piece of shit. Yeah. But it's not the same thing as the mental disorder itself, right?
Well, you see, just back to the spectrum, the histrionic and the narcissistic personality disorder, and that's one of the most important things to understand is narcissism exists like so many things on a spectrum, and it goes from the people who have a little too much ego to the psychopath. That's the one end to the other end. And in between are all the, is the histrionics or the pathological narcissists. And there's clinical, meaning those people that are determined to have those particular issues by a psychiatrist or psychologist through the testing of like the test I mentioned by Dr. Robert Hare. You would test somebody, but if they ask them certain questions or check off certain behaviors, and that would prove that they're, or at least highly indicate they are a psychopath. But you may have been more right than you realized in a whole bunch of people. Because one of the most shocking things to me when I was doing my studies was most experts say, well, I shouldn't say most, but majority of experts say that 1 to 4% of every population is a psychopath. So that means at minimum, 1 out of every 100 people you meet is a psychopath. Yeah. And just one of the other things that I really battled, but at first I was like, wow, we got 300 million people, or, whatever it is now, 330, 340. And that's that's 3 point something million psychopaths, even if we're going on the low end. And that's not including the histrionics, the sociopaths, the borderlines, and all the other types of pathological narcissists. And by pathological narcissists, I mean, there's a lot of popular terms like malignant narcissist and certain others. I like pathological because that means pathological is a compulsive maladaptive behavior that you can't control. It's your way of being. Like
a pathological liar, which is I think what most people will be very familiar with. Is someone who lies, who cannot help it. They can't stop from doing it.
And the majority of them are in this range. If you come across a pathological liar, they're lying. Like I said, as Dr. Harris said, they put on a mask every morning and say it's showtime, and they lie because they can't deal with their reality. And the main cause of most of these issues is childhood trauma. And one of the best things I read was the child of a narcissist's self-esteem is under attack from the day they're born. And that just blew me away because my friend, after having some discussions, we realized the father was a narcissist. And so my friend was groomed to serve a narcissist. And that's why they were such easy prey to a sociopath, because it's kind of like one of the things I've written about is, did you ever see the movie Chronicles of Riddick? Do you remember that one?
I love the movie Chronicles of Riddick. I'm a huge Vin Diesel fan, my man.
Good. Because I have a good friend who just despises Vin Diesel, so I try not to bring.
A lot of people despise Vin Diesel. I don't give a shit. His movies entertain the shit out of me, man. He's great.
Exactly. I'm the same way. But
I'm not watching movies. I don't need every single movie to be profound. And Vin Diesel does a great job of making me just happy.
Yeah. Well, I found some profound parts of Chronicles of Riddick. So, and what it was, I don't know if you remember the scene where I think they're in the hell planet, and they have to battle a bunch of people to get, go on the surface or go, so whatever it was. They were just, and he was with his apprentice Jack, the young woman who he taught how to be a true fighter.
Yeah, they're escaping the galaxy's most inescapable prison.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And so they have to go just before the big battle. I can't remember exactly the line was there, but they go, should we play our favorite game? Who's the better killer?
Oh yeah.
And that's a really good way that's helped me conceptualize the different levels of narcissists is who's the better narcissist. And I just wrote about this when it came to Putin, in that he's Russia's best narcissist. So whenever a narcissist, a sociopath, a psychopath, whoever they all meet, they instantly decide who's the better narcissist. And that the other ones will defer to them because they know their game inside and out. They know all their tricks because it's pathological. And they're not this, there's obviously many subtle differences, but there's also a lot of similarities. And one of the main ones is because being great storytellers, being able to lie with ease and comfort and have no shame about it. Now, certainly the lower end ones, the histrionics, have a lot of shame. And I almost don't even want to talk about them because I never really focused on them. My main focuses were, narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths. And the borderline people, they actually seem to have some chance of improvement because they realize their lives are kind of, how should I say, they're not helping themselves. They actually have some self-awareness that they need to improve their lives so they won't be so miserable.
I would say I have personally known people in my life who I think definitely have been like, they have a lot of the symptoms and characteristics of a narcissist, to the point where it's like very pathological, very fucked up. But at the same time, they're in there, they don't want it. They don't want it to be that way, and they actually do have a desire to change or a desire to, I don't know. I'm not sure to put this into words. Like a desire to heal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because and see, the child of a narcissist is a term I came across is called as a co-narcissist, kind of like a child of an alcoholic, or, is trained to serve the alcoholic. And the co-narcissist, because they have their realities distorted by the person who's taught them, who's groomed them to serve them, they have a lot of narcissistic characteristics, but in a loving environment, they can heal, they can change, they can be normal, good people. And I actually, at one point, realized that I had a couple of my closest friends, like the one I'm mentioning, had pretty strong narcissistic tendencies. And I had to ask myself, what is it about me that some of my closest friends are fairly narcissistic? And what I came to realize, at least in my circumstance, is that I have some very eccentric people in my family. And like my grandfather was late to all 4 of his own weddings.
Oh my God.
He was even late to he didn't even make it to his own funeral. Uh, when I was a little boy, he was a brilliant person, and he had the biggest heart in the whole world, and he just cared so much. And he had his own newspaper, and he did so many great things, but he was not a normal person. he did not live in the reality you and I live in, or most people. And I as a kid, I would joke that I go, well, the shortest units of time my grandfather knows are sun and moon, because we'd have to tell him to something, if a dinner was at 6 o'clock, we'd tell him it was at 2 o'clock, and he would still be 2 hours late.
I've known people like that my entire life as well.
My favorite memory of my grandfather, though, and maybe not favorite, but it's a funny one, is when I was a little boy, he'd drive around with him, and because he'd work for 48 hours straight getting his newspaper out, and we'd drive around, and I'd go, "Wake up, Grandpa, the light's green." But anyway, and I have my dear cousin is just a brilliant person, and she also is very similar to him, but she is the most kindest, caring person. But anyway, so the point is that I was used to non-normal behavior in good people. And so there are a lot of people that have maybe strong narcissistic tendencies, but in their heart of hearts, they're good people, or they can get there. And that's the difference between the type of people that we're going to talk about, which are people that are pathological. And the thing is there's, at this time, there is no cure. There's no treatment. Now, lots of psychologists and psychologists sell people on treatments, and you can help people at the margins. But at least for the psychopaths, it's a brain deformity. Their conscience, the part where you feel emotions, does not light up. It does not work. They do brain scans, and
I don't want to derail us right
no,
here,
go.
But I wanted to ask, just because you brought up two kind of very, very extremely different types of people, and when you're saying like displaying narcissistic tendencies to a certain extent, and I just wanted to just a quick clarification, because like you said, we're going to go into this later and talk about people like Vladimir Putin, and that's one full extreme. And then you brought up someone like your grandfather, who was actually a great guy, but also, could forget about other people from time to time.
Right.
And I think earlier you said you don't like to use the term malignant narcissist, but I think that's the reason why people started adding that adjective to it. Am I right to give you to delineate it from, let's say, you're run of the mill, someone who's very self-obsessed, maybe forgets about other people, and then someone. I mean, when I first started hearing that term, that was obviously during the Trump administration, and to describe Trump, where it's like someone who truly, his narcissism is harmful to others. Is that?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, I personally, to me, Trump is the poster child for narcissistic personality disorder.
Yeah.
If you look at the checklist of what is on narcissistic personality disorder, he checks everyone so clearly, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's just like, how does everybody not see this? And malignant narcissist, I've learned to be okay with the term malignant narcissist, because at first it was used all the time and I didn't like it. Now, my first initial reaction was, well, it's not in the DSM, but then neither is psychopath. Psychopath used to be in the DSM, but they changed it from psychopathic personality disorder to antisocial personality disorder, which I really don't like, because that, I know plenty of people that are not social. It's almost like a nice way of putting it or something. It's like, and the best thing I heard was a young woman who was autistic, and she said, I hate that term because, I'm not very social and I don't show expression on my face, but I have emotions. And so people think I'm a psychopath, but I'm, but I'm not. I'm just shy and antisocial, but I'm not a psychopath. And with the malignant narcissist, the reason it took me a long time to be okay with it, because I used to argue with it. Well, it's not the DSM. But what I realized, and malignant narcissist is sort of. There's another. Have you ever heard of dark triad?
I have not.
Term? Okay. Well, dark triad is a combination, and actually tetrad is 4 things. So it's is an increase of the dark triad, which is a combination of Machiavellianism, psychopathy, psychopath, narcissism, and sadism. That's the sadism, I believe, is the one that was made to the tetrad, and that's a pretty popular term. And malignant narcissism,
it's like a John Wayne Gacy or something. Is that kind of like?
Yeah. Certainly. I mean, but malignant narcissism or narcissist is pretty close to the same thing.
Yeah.
Now, but neither of those, again, are in the textbook, so to speak, although they are used a lot and becoming more popular. And, I've stopped trying to fight the terms, although I like dark triad. But the point is, what I finally realized that the issue with malignant narcissists I had is it makes it sound like people who have narcissistic personality disorder aren't malignant. And because I went back and forth with people about it, and malignant means progressively gets worse. And that is what happens with pathological narcissists, because there is no cure, there is no treatment other than teaching them to not be so greedy because it's in their own self-interest.
I think maybe why for me it seemed like a useful term is because obviously the term malignant narcissist implies that there is no such thing as a benign narcissist. Mm-hmm. And this is something that you and I had discussed earlier before the podcast, and that's going back to into the fictional world, because this is the place where everyone's going to like really know the most. And then we were talking about Han Solo,
right?
Like, is Han Solo a benign narcissist, or is he just because clearly he does care about people, but on the surface it seems like he doesn't care about anybody, or very hard to say. I'm going to leave it to you, but I mean,
okay, well,
he doesn't care about anyone but himself.
I totally cheated. And after we talked, I watched the Solo movie. I did a bunch of kind of refreshers out, and I'm a Star Wars, I don't want to say fanboy, fine, we'll say that word. I've listened to just about every audiobook, which I don't know. I don't know if you can say I read them if you listen to an audiobook, but
I can was reading.
Okay, yeah. Well, good. I like to, but I just, I try to be honest with it. And, every movie, I love the Clone Wars, I love Rebels, I love the Bad Batch. I mean, you name it, I love it. And so I wanted to, really kind of dig down a little bit into some of the characters we discussing.
Yeah.
And there's videos on YouTube about, some of this stuff with Han. And one of the things is Han is a great example of the difference between, say, as you put it, abrasive self-confidence and actual narcissism or unhealthy narcissism. Yeah. Because and again, remember Han watching Solo again reminded me of Han's childhood trauma. He was raised as a street rat in Corellia. He had to fake it till he made it. I mean, he was with Lady Proxima and had to steal for her so she could have shelter and protection. So he grew up with all this trauma. Obviously you assume there's a lot of trauma in that, but he had his girl Kira, the one played by Emilia Clarke. I don't know if you saw the Solo movie, and I
love that movie.
Yeah. Well, and they loved each other, and he truly cared about her, and she truly cared about him, and that's what I found in my studying Han a little deeper, and some comments I saw online was that Han's about his friends. He wants to be accepted. He wants to have a family. He was all about himself, but he had to be, because that was the only way he was able to survive. And that's what, his childhood trauma taught him. But he really did care about Kira. He loved her. He wanted to be with her. And then later, when that didn't work out, he had love with, Luke and Leia and Chewie, and, Chewie taught him empathy. He had the capacity for empathy and caring, whereas, the pathological narcissists do not. They truly only, it's all about me.
Yeah.
And that's,
I guess like that's what and this is what we were trying to maybe get a point across with, was that, I mean, there is also just the term egotistical.
right.
And, it must at least be said that Han Solo is an egotistical dude, right?
Mm. Well, yeah, I mean, certainly, but I mean, to me, it's kind of, it's that fake it till you make it kind of thing that he had to live with. And, and his charm and his charisma helped him get away with things and handle things. So he has certain commonalities with narcissists, but he's got a good heart, and he cares about other people, and he has empathy, but he knows that he has to bullshit and work it and play the system, because that's the way he was raised his whole life. And so that's sort of where the worm turns, is in your childhood, with the trauma, is, do you have those capacities, and do you have someone who teaches you empathy? That's a big deal too, because that was one of the things I realized with my friend, was a grandparent taught them empathy. And that's why they wouldn't go full dark side. So, if we're going on the Star Wars theme. And that's kind of where, like I said, where it turns is, are you so broken? Are you so traumatized that you become shattered and you become one of these types of narcissists? And, or did you have the, how can I say, the genetics and the brain to already get you there? And just one real quick thing is, Dr. James Fallon, I don't know, you may or may not heard of him. He studies brain. He's a brain researcher, and he studied the brains of psychopaths. And they would do imaging, and they would find that the part of the brain for empathy or emotions did not turn on. It was actually the language part of the brain that turned on. And after a while, he was searching through some folders, and he found out that he himself had the brain of a psychopath. He had a brain like John Wayne Gacy. Like, he goes, I saw this brain that was one of the worst psychopaths I'd ever seen, and then I removed the label, and it was mine from the test group. And so he's really fascinating in talking about these types of things. And what he talks about is, my family gave me a lot of love. They were very accepting. They were very, but my mom also knew to keep me out of trouble and to look out for me and to tell my teachers to X, Y, and Z. And, he found an outlet that was good for him to use. He was a brilliant man. A lot of psychopaths are actually very highly intelligent. And that's pretty much why I was sure Trump was never a psychopath. But
and also this, what you just brought up, that's a very good explanation for how there can be, like, statistically, if you're going to say 1 in 100 people are psychopaths, but 1 in 100 people are not John Wayne Gacy or Ed Kemp or one of these types of, like, serial killers, because that's the dark triad, right? You got to have these other components that's going to make you go out and start committing, like, heinous acts of like violence towards others, right?
Absolutely. But the key, and this is more what Fallon and many others talk about, is that it's a combination. Now, it's a combination of the brain. If you have the brain of a psychopath, you don't feel things really that much, other than the anger is something apparently is very felt, but it's very primal. And the other is, there's these gene variants called alleles, which I've tried to understand, but basically it's your genes. So there's your brain, your genes, and abuse. And early on, I was like, oh, so that's what happens when somebody becomes a serial killer, when they're badly abused and they already have the predisposition of a psychopath's brain, and or the alleles I've just been learning about. And so it goes back to that childhood trauma. I don't know if you ever watched the show Dexter, but Dexter's dad.
Oh, hell yeah, man! I've seen Dexter.
Yeah, Dexter's dad gave him a code. Now, that's an idealized version, I assume, of. Now, it's tricky because sociopath and psychopath are often used interchangeably, and for the longest time, I battled to try to understand what's the difference or what are they talking about.
Yeah, I'm really curious too, because I always thought that sociopath meant you were incapable of feeling empathy or caring what other people feel. Is that? I mean, I thought that was the definition.
Yes. And same with psychopaths.
So they both have that. The definition's practically the same in that sense.
Yes. Well, here this will hopefully, this was what helped me clear it up, and how I delineate it. But there's overlap too. A psychopath is born, with that brain deformity and or the genetic disposition. Sociopaths are made by their environment, and they're a virtual psychopath. Their behaviors,
wow.
Their behaviors and their traits are very similar. Although the psychopath, like going back to Riddick, is the ultimate narcissist, because they don't have any. They're not built by their trauma. Their brains was already there. And maybe they got a bunch of trauma, but they were there. They were born that way.
Yeah.
And, they can be taught a code and how to use their, the way they are for good. But like with James Fallon, when he went to his family and they said, did you know I was this way? And they said, oh yeah, we told you were. And he goes, no, you told me I was crazy. And I go, no, well, we knew you're a psychopath because you're selfish, you're manipulative, and you're kind of greedy, but you're funny and you don't hurt people. And that's another thing that, again, with Han, is they have a lot of superficial charm. And a lot, because they're real world. So the psychopaths know they need to hide because they know they're different. They sense they're just like with Dexter. Dexter knows he needs to put on a mask to pretend he's a normal person, and he hides who he really is. Sociopaths, they do, but they're not. It's not as natural for them because they've been built by the trauma. Now, again, there's some because of the brain and the genes, there are certain predispositions, but so which would cause some overlap here or there. And how can I say this? Kind of lost my train of thoughts.
That's cool. I was actually going to interject a question anyway.
Okay, good. Go.
Was that so? What you're saying is the only way you could tell the difference if you had a sociopath and a psychopath in the same room, they're behaving the exact same way. They have the same traits. The only way you can tell which is which would be a CAT scan, like to literally scan their brain.
fMRI, I believe it is. That's the one Dr. Fallon used. And what they do is they show people images of just horrific images of like pet violence and human violence and just the most scariest, creepiest things. And, for you and I, the part of our brain where our emotions are lights up. And for a psychopath, it doesn't light up at all. Okay. It's just the language part of their brain lights up. It's just so so they're not exactly the same, and that's the trick of it. Is they're very similar, but sociopaths are considered to be more erratic, less planning, less thinking. They're just more reactionary, whereas psychopaths are more methodical and precise. But at the same time, there's a really good something that's helped me kind of like the difference between Trump and DeSantis is the difference between, say, an organized psychopath and an unorganized psychopath. Now, I'm not saying Trump's a psychopath. I might be saying the other guy is, but they. Sorry, I was
maybe DeSantis appears to be more calculated.
No, absolutely. And actually, I'm gonna be writing. I've written one article about DeSantis from a political lens, and I will shortly writing one about the psychological lens. And I have not seen any indication that DeSantis isn't a psychopath.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I'll write about, and I haven't really shared, but I'll happy to share with you, is that I studied him for over a month. And I watched, video, audio, read things. And one of the main tells, and you'll see this in movies with, all kinds of villains or whatever, is he has on that mask. He smiles at the right time. He laughs at the right times. But as soon as the moment's over, dead flat. His face is completely flat. He has no affect. And that is a sign of a psychopath. Also sociopath too, and narcissist, because they don't really care, but specifically him, as I like to say, if you've been greedy and evil your entire life and you have no emotions on your face, you might be a psychopath. But they fake it well. That's the trick, is they mimic it really well.
We had moving forward to we were gonna bring up because we're already getting into like a lot of these real life narcissists, and we're definitely gonna get back into it, especially Vladimir.
Right.
Just
get back to the fun stuff.
But yeah, I want to hop back into the fun stuff again real quick, because we were talking. This is a question that I just asked you before, and I want to bring it up again. And that is, obviously we're both fans of Stan Lee and his creations, and he's created a lot of very interesting characters. But one of the things I thought was very great with what he's created with X-Men is the villains that are not strictly narcissists or psychopaths. And I think we were going to bring up like Magneto, because with the X-Men, you have almost always heroes that are not all good, and you have villains that have compelling reasons to be villains. They're not villains for the sheer sadism. For instance, Magneto. He's more, like you said, he's more of a freedom fighter. I don't know if you wanted to kind of like expand a little bit on like that realm of villainy.
Absolutely. And I, when we talked, and I mentioned, well, pretty much all villains are narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths. And you mentioned Magneto, and I want to thank you, because you made me rethink what I'd said. And that's why I like to spend some time thinking about things so I can really get it down. And digging a little deeper, Stan Lee's main motivation for Magneto and Dr. Xavier were Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. And I initially, as I mentioned, as villains go, he didn't really seem like a narcissist, sociopath, or psychopath, because he again, back to the childhood trauma. He was, he watched his parents die, different. It depends which Magneto we're talking about, because there's many different versions.
Yeah, there's a lot of different story arcs. We can go by the canon of the films where his family died in the Holocaust. If we would,
yes. Well, I cheated and watched those movies too, because I love them. But he in the first ones, he watched his family get taken away, and then actually, I watched First Class after, and the bad scientist who was testing him actually brought his mother in and shot her in front of him because he wouldn't make the metal move.
Yeah.
And so, but even if it was just, your parents died in the Holocaust and you were stuck in a concentration camp, the amount of childhood trauma is just massive, obviously. And there was one good line when it was in First Class, when he was hunting down some Nazis, and they said, "Who are you?" And he goes, "Let's just say I'm Frankenstein's monster and I'm looking for my creator."
Yeah.
And but as I watched more, yes, he's a freedom fighter. Yes, he has great reasons. Yes, he is caring for his people, and he's not all about himself. But at the same time, the line is so thin based on what he does, because even in the first one, he was going to have, Xavier kill all the humans.
Oh yeah.
Because the humans were going to have them kill all the mutants, and then he switched it to, fine, let's kill all the humans. And like even when he was, they teamed up, and he was going to kill Rogue to use that machine to turn everybody into mutants, or all the world leaders into mutants. And then later, I don't remember next one or two, and he sees Rogue and he says, "I love what you've done with your hair." And he's just messing with her, just psychologically messing with her. And he has good reasons. He has good, because of the trauma. He's, the humans are trying to eliminate all the mutants.
I mean,
but
he is an extremist, but
right.
he lives in a world where how could you not be an extremist? Like they're literally trying to exterminate all mutants. And And he just so happens to be the second most powerful mutant on the planet. But I guess, this is a difficult thing to bring up, because there are so many X-Men storylines. It's been around since the 1960s. I think it would be best to stick with the movies, just because that's what most people are familiar with. But I do want to bring up the series, The Death of Professor Xavier, where Professor X is killed by his own son. And after that occurs, Magneto becomes the leader. He takes Professor X's role as leader of the X-Men. Like that one major event changes him completely.
Right.
Like I said, we were talking about a fictional character who's lived hundreds of different storylines.
It's tricky. It's tricky. But you know, I guess the one other interesting thing that kind of came to mind was he is repeating the trauma of his childhood in that he now believes that the mutants are the superior race. Like, you know, the Nazis were telling him about being Jewish and that humans are worthless, just like the Nazis were doing to him. But like you said, he was not completely, you know, he had capacity for empathy. He cared about, you know, his own people. He wasn't just doing things only for himself. And that, again, that's a big difference between narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths. But at the same time, based on his trauma, maybe with his, you know, he might have, you know, genetic, you know, he has one genetic variation, he might have another one where he's more susceptible based on the trauma that he went through.
Hold up. It's time for an ad. Get ready for a brand new music compilation from your favorite fast casual restaurant / grocery store supplier. That's right. Walk down the frozen aisle in style with the new CD. Now that's what I call California Pizza Kitchen, Volume 1. With your favorites such as California Pizza Kitchen,
California Pizza Kitchen. California Pizza Kitchen.
and California Pizza Kitchen.
California Pizza Kitchen. California Pizza Kitchen. In the city of CPK. In the city of CPK.
Out on bail, fresh it up, chill, California pizza. Soon as I hit the streets, all I see is kitchens. And classics like California Pizza Kitchen.
California pizza.
California Pizza. CPK.
And who could forget California Pizza Kitchen?
Welcome to the California Pizza Kitchen. It's a CPK. It's a CPK.
And just pay an extra $9.99 plus shipping and handling for the deluxe version California Pizza Kitchen CPK.
Born in the CPK. I was born in the CPK.
And also,
It's a party in the CPK. It's a party in the CPK.
and deep cuts such as
California Pizza Kitchen. California Pizza Kitchen. California Pizza Kitchen. California Pizza Kitchen.
order today to save $10.99 today and pay only shipping and handling for your copy of Now That's What I Call California Pizza Kitchen, Volume 1. And now back to the interview.
And like the next person we probably talk about is Anakin Skywalker, Darth Vader, in that how he had the potential to go from being a sweet little kid to the most, one of the most evil guys in the galaxy, to being redeemed by his son. Because, or at least, they often talk about how Luke sacrificed himself in the kind of the Jesus role, willing to sacrifice himself to, for his father's soul. But so, I mean, and that's what's when someone is clinical, when someone is just locked into this, the likelihood of them changing is very, very minute. But for people who have been triggered, abused, manipulated, have massive trauma, there are chances at redemption. There are chances at coming back from it.
Yeah, and so kind of what you're saying too with Magneto and with during the World War II era and all that stuff. Had he been born in, let's say, New Hampshire instead of Germany, everything about him could have almost certainly would have been different.
Absolutely.
And he almost certainly would have been an ally to Professor X and never would have been the leader of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, or depending on which comics you're looking at.
Yeah, considering the way Stryker and some of our guys were treating the mutants, he might have ended up there as well, just not as traumatized, not as bitter, not as the having to watch your mother get shot in front of you is pretty traumatic. And the obviously, like I said, concentration camps obviously very traumatic. And he might have been a bit more militant, but just not so extreme that he was going to kill all the humans who were trying to kill him.
Yeah, like some truly becoming like genocidal. And
right.
Actually, that's a good segue, because I could say I really could try to get you to talk about X-Men with me all day, and but you just finished an article on Vladimir Putin, profiling him, and this is, I guess, would you say that Vladimir Putin is another example, like a very like poster child style example of a pathological narcissist?
Yes. Now the tricky thing is what's actually true about Putin and what we actually know about him are not as easy to be 100% certain of.
Yeah.
But he grew up in St. Petersburg, and post-war were the Nazis, and his two older brothers were killed. And I mean, there's fairly well-known stories about him, and I'm taking them that they're accurate. One of his brothers, was just tossed in a mass grave. He never met his oldest brother. They were
killed by the Nazis in World War II?
I believe so. Well, a siege by the Nazis of St. Petersburg.
Oh, they just died of starvation.
Well, I'm not 100% sure exactly. I mean, the Nazis were the cause of their death one way or another.
Yeah, for sure.
And he was the only surviving child. And so he was very much praised by his parents, or loved by his parents, because he was the only surviving child. But he, in his own words, had said that they were never very emotional and they were never very close. And these are sort of, we'll just say potential signs, of someone who has a predisposition to this type of narcissism or pathological narcissism. Because if you're not naturally, remember the no affect, no emotions, no feeling, that's an indicator. And then he also, he was also very small, and he was apparently bullied a lot. And also that where he lived was apparently a very poor, rough neighborhood where he got beat up a lot, or at least bullied a lot. And that's why he took judo, because he stayed small while the other guys stayed big, and he needed to protect himself. But again, it goes back to that childhood trauma.
Yeah.
And he one of the guys who was in his inner circle was dating a woman named Alexandra Tolstoy, who is related to the famous Tolstoy. And she recently came out and she said, I didn't know him personally, but everybody in that group was a massive narcissist. And she herself said that she thought Putin had narcissistic personality disorder. I would lean towards sociopath, but it's a narcissistic personality disorder is just a slightly less cracked sociopath.
Okay.
And so, I mean, again, it's on that spectrum, and it's kind of, it doesn't have, the differences are very small. at least in my opinion. And that's why I struggle with malignant narcissists, because to me they all get progressively worse. They all are malignant. They all do, unless they can find, have that love and whatever. And even then they still often have it.
Unless they're like Dexter and like their dad's ghost comes back and visits them constantly to give them sage advice.
Yeah, Dexter confused me because Dexter was said it was a sociopath, and his behavior was more psychopath in my view. But like so many things in TV, they don't. Sorry about that. Like so many things in TV, they don't often get it right.
Yeah.
and it's not that I know for sure. I mean, it's a fictional character, but it was, because they show, again, Dexter's childhood trauma of, as a baby being in his own mother's blood and all that, when she got killed, and that was the reasoning for him being the way he was. But he was such a good planner. He was so zero affect. He seemed a lot more like a psychopath to me. But it doesn't really matter what it is, because it's just fictional. But
I think I was just trying to get to the idea of the foil that the dad plays, where Dexter is a sociopath or a psychopath. He's going to kill either way. He's got to kill. That's for some reason he has this need to do that, but he has guidance from
his code.
Respects. He has a guide. And I guess what we're talking about when we talk about someone like Vladimir Putin, who could influence someone like that, especially now. I mean, who could possibly influence what he's almost certainly the richest man in the world, whatever Elon Musk may say.
Yeah, nobody can influence him. The only thing that he's all about himself, his own fear, needs, whatever, everything. So many people say, well, he cares about Mother Russia, and he doesn't care. He doesn't care at all. He cares about what he wants and to keep himself in power and to keep himself and doing well. And he's got all the money he needs, and it's all because he didn't care about money anymore. Because what do you care when you got gazillions of dollars? And he is so good at how he set himself up that my initial thought was he's a psychopath, but in my article I kept writing sociopath / psychopath because I couldn't it seems like socially he was conditioned to be that way, but there's likely that he had the brain issues or whatever to get there anyway. But then on top of that, Russia's never known really democracy. The first czar was Ivan the Terrible.
Yeah.
And he was really terrible. He was a really mean, bad man. And almost every Russian, Russia's never known democracy. They've never known, their people are just, they've pretty much been slaves when it was serfdom and then communism and it was absolute rule. And, they've been so conditioned to deal with lies and bullshit. I mean, they were living 1984 in real life. And I don't know if you ever heard this, but when the Soviet Union fell, one of the main questions so many Russian people wanted to know was, how did Orwell get it so right when he was never here?
Oh yeah.
and he did. I mean, that's what they were living it. And that's why, Putin can get away with so much, because that's what the Russian people in many ways are used to. I mean, they're used to a czar who just treats, pumps up their egos and treats, tells them how wonderful they are and how great everything is. And it's everybody else's fault, play the victim, blame the victim. These are all characteristics of narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths. And that's kind of when I eventually came down to it, is whether someone is clinically a narcissist, sociopath, or psychopath or not, but they act that way all the time, and the effects they put into society are that way all the time. What's the difference? What does it matter? It doesn't matter, because but you can, and that's, I guess that's the trick, and that's the key, is when you're figuring out who's the better narcissist, you can use the psychology of narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths to better understand and predict the behavior of people who, even if they're not clinical, are just acting like it.
It's kind of like if even if you're not a kleptomaniac, but if you steal shit every single time you go into a store, what's the difference? I mean,
Exactly.
we're just splitting hairs at this point.
Right.
When you say that, you talked about this a little bit at the beginning, and you just brought it up again, and I'm just curious, when you're saying when you've got, let's say, a group of people, and every single person in that group is a narcissist, psychopath, whatever, and you were saying whoever is the best narcissist ends up kind of the leader, or it rises to the top of that group. Well, for one, I'm curious how that works, and also is that kind of like because so many people felt like Trump always deferred to Putin. Is that just because Putin's just a better?
He's the better narcissist.
He's just
just like all of Trump's followers defer to him because he's the better narcissist.
Okay.
And as well as so many people in the Republican Party. I mean, we briefly mentioned DeSantis. I mean, the Republican Party in Florida has just completely slavishly submitted themselves to whatever DeSantis wants because he's the better narcissist.
I guess how to put it, like, but what makes you a better good narcissist, or what makes you great at being a narcissist?
The psychopath is the ultimate narcissist because they don't care. They have you remember the guy in school that had the stone cold dead eyes and you never wanted to fight that guy.
Yeah,
that was probably a psychopath.
Okay.
And that is the ultimate narcissist, as long as they're an organized one. The disorganized ones, certainly there's ones that are, less have it together, but the ones that are fairly, reasonably intelligent and fairly organized by some code or whatever it is, you do not want to mess with that person unless you are completely ready to take them on. And the sociopath knows that the psychopath is superior to them. The psychopath, like, another person that seems an awful lot like the psychopath is Stephen Miller. And, Stephen Miller just knew how, he just knew how to play Trump to get what he wanted, to get all the, he was like the last survivor or whatever on the island of, the White House of crazy. But, so they will pretend to submit. They will pretend to play, but they know, all the while knowing, they all believe they're the better psychopath, or the better narcissist, I should say, in their minds. Yeah. But the the sociopath, because that was based on trauma, that's something the psychopath doesn't really care or feel. And it can mold them, like as we talked about, into becoming a serial killer or whatever. But since the sociopath is a virtual psychopath, the pathological the people with narcissistic personality disorder and histrionic personality disorder, and people just generally high narcissism, they don't want to mess with that guy or girl because they don't. They're even more. It's almost with a matter of conscience and a matter of determination. And, the psychopath there's no flinch in them. I've often thought about certain athletes who seem like psychopaths, and when that big moment on the big stage happens, they don't feel the pressure. And that's why they can perform so well. And so and that's really what I guess that's kind of what it comes down to, is a level of pressure you feel or are susceptible to. Because the sociopath that was just messing with my friend, I mean, completely shameless, no conscience, just flat affect. But I also know there was a lot of childhood trauma, so that's what led me to the sociopath aspect. And whereas the narcissists, they're really, it's massive insecurity. And it's just, and so it's level of insecurity and determination that kind of determines who's stronger and who's weaker.
It probably stands to reason that a lot of celebrities are psychotic.
Well, that's actually a really good that you mentioned that, because one of the things I realized is it's so easy to transpose or conflate psycho and psychotic. Because, the psychopath is the person who has the brain deformity and a psychosis is, imagining things.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but I actually wrote about that, and because it tricked me. I mean, I was often using those words interchangeably or wrong or whatever, and people mix them up. Someone's hallucinating. Somebody will say, "Oh, what a psycho." No, they're psychotic. They're not a psychopath.
Yeah.
And whereas and vice versa. And so that was one of the biggest things that, after I was doing all my studies, was how do I not know about this stuff? I love this stuff. I love psychology. Like I said, I watched Sherlock Holmes. I thought I knew all about it. And I learned I knew almost nothing that was correct. And it was like, how does this stuff hide in the dark? It's like it literally hides in the dark. And I would see these
It doesn't help us too much, I guess, in pop culture, how these words become interchangeable. Like, I mean, starting probably before this, but starting very, like, one of the big examples is like Alfred Hitchcock's movie Psycho. So that's, when people just start using the shorthand term. They just start saying people are psychos, not psychopaths. And then Christian Bale in American Psycho. And then and it almost becomes like slang, Well,
there is overlap. I mean, certainly psychopaths can be psychotic.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And psychotic people can act psychopathic. And it's just like one of the things that I came to realize the most was when I started talking about a lot of the stuff in 2014 on Twitter, and people kept saying, "Well, do you have a psychology degree or psychiatry degree?" And I'd say no. And I said, "Well, I studied this because, for a couple of years to help a friend." And they go, "Well, you can't say anything if you don't have a degree." But I don't know if you may or may not have heard of the Goldwater rule. And the Goldwater rule is 1964. Barry Goldwater ran for president. He lost to, I think it was Johnson. And anyway, Fact Magazine asked over 1,000 psychiatrists to comment on whether Goldwater was mentally okay to be president. And it was a very unscientific poll. It was like 20% responded, but they basically came back and said that he was a psychopath, and or something to that effect. But anyway, so he lost, but he ended up suing Fact Magazine and won. And the psychiatry industry was really embarrassed because it was so unscientific and such BS. Because he had his issues, but he wasn't like George Bush. He had his issues, but he was not a psychopath.
Yeah.
And anyway, so psychiatrists are not allowed to publicly analyze any public figure or anyone they haven't personally examined, or not examined, but or tested and then have permission to talk about it. Like any psychopath would ever give the permission for their psychiatrist to talk about their oh yeah, my patient's a psychopath, elect him president, sure. But so I came to realize that was the catch-22.
Yeah.
Is that okay? And by extension, psychologists aren't really supposed to talk about it either. And a lot of state boards go by the Goldwater rule. So that's how they hid in the dark so well, and especially in our politics and in business and everything else, but specifically in the politics, because psychiatrists and psychologists can't talk about it, and ethically, and anybody who has a fair amount of knowledge but doesn't have a degree is dismissed as someone who has no credibility.
Yeah, that's insane. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was the wonderful thing about having Bandy Lee say such nice thing about a couple of my articles, and now I can say, well, my writing and theories were endorsed by Bandy.
What if there's a way? Just in the way what you're just now describing, all these politicians are slipping through this loophole created by the Goldwater rule that makes it where people, like psychologists, can't evaluate them publicly based on what they know and then without their permission and so on. And there's an ethical thing behind that. But I wonder if there's a little loophole in the other direction. For instance, you can write an article and then, highly respected people in the field of psychology who that is their profession is to make these diagnoses, to look at your writing and say this is solid. Does that make sense? Like
Absolutely.
This is a solid analysis.
It's based on the scientific evidence that we have.
So basically, all they're saying is that your writing is a solid analysis. They're not personally saying anything wrong. So I wonder if there's just you can make it a 2-step process to getting maybe some more of it out there.
Thanks to Trump. One of the good things about Trump is that he made it so people in the industry, a lot of people are starting to speak out more and are starting to question the Goldwater rule and saying this makes no sense. I just wrote an article called "How Psychiatry is Failing America" about this very subject, and how you would think there'd be some sort of warning system that we would not want people who are sociopaths, psychopaths, and narcissists be allowed to call themselves public servants when the last thing on their mind and will never enter their mind is serving the public. They're only interested in serving themselves, and so it's almost like we're helping our own destruction in a way, and that's why Benny Lee and the people of Duty to Warn and Mary Trump and others have spoken out so much about this, because our democracy is on the line.
Yeah.
And because if you put narcissists and sociopaths and psychopaths in power, they will do what's good for them and nobody else, because they don't care. They have no conscience. They have no, feelings, no emotions about or empathy about anybody.
Well, now that we're on the subject, now that we've been on culture wars for a minute, I got one thing to tell you, Sam, and that's that we're dangerously close to the lightning round. Now I got to switch. We've gone over some pretty heavy shit today, and the lightning round it's the game part of the podcast. The whole point is I ask you a question. You got to answer it as fast as you can. No time to think. But some of these are a little complex, man. So, feel free to take a little time to think, because we are doing a culture war lightning round. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just bring up something from the culture war, like so-and-so versus so-and-so. And you have one of two things to do. If it's kind of vague, you have to identify who the key players are in this culture war in the first place. A lot of them are actually, no one has really proven to me who is playing the game, or just say who's going to win. Either way, pick a winner. Let's go ahead. Let's start with the war on Christmas. All right. Who is fighting this war, and who's going to win?
Well, the only people fighting this war, obviously, are the conservatives trying to make Christian people feel insecure about people who aren't Christian or all into Christmas, thinking that we're going after their Christmas.
Okay, so Christmas wins?
Christmas always wins.
Yeah, Christmas always wins.
As I like to say, give me a holiday and I'll celebrate it. I don't, it's all good. It's actually here, this will answer real quick. So it was early in the Iraq war. I watched all the news I could. And so I switched to this new channel called Fox News. And I said, it was 1 a.m. and there was this guy named Brian Wilson on, and I'll never forget it. And he starts off and he says, and as we all know, our troops are doing the Lord's work in Iraq.
Ugh.
And I was like, wait, is this supposed to be a news show? What? So that's where the war on Christmas is coming from.
Fucking idiots. All right. Moving on. This one might be a little more complex. The war on drugs. Who's playing and who's going to win?
Drugs will win.
Yeah. Drugs won.
I live in, I'm in California. You know what changed when we legalized marijuana? Nothing, except you can go to the marijuana store.
All right. No, this is going to be, I'm very curious to hear your answer on this one, because we've been talking about this shithead quite a bit on the podcast, and he is at war with an American icon / mega corporation. Governor Ron DeSantis versus Disney. Who's going to win?
Mickey Mouse. Never bet against the Mouse House.
I wouldn't fucking bet against the Mouse House either. And they own Marvel. They own Star Wars. Ron DeSantis, he's a nobody. He's gonna be a fucking nobody. He thinks he's gonna be the president.
Yeah, he that was a bridge too far. He took that one too far.
He thought that if he dick rode for Trump hard enough, he could take on Disney. I don't think so either, man. I think he's gonna fucking lose. All right.
Well, just one coincidence. That's the thing about psychopaths, is they're totally tone deaf.
No one wants to work anymore versus work from home.
Ooh, that's a tough one. Work from home, because everybody wants to work at what they want to do.
Yeah,
At least in my opinion. Certainly, I'm sure there are plenty. I can't speak for the kids who maybe want to sit around all day and play video games, but but that would be their job.
A thought about it. Maybe it was like, if you go back, well, and not, I mean, in some cultures, you don't have to go back. Some cultures it's still like this. But if you go back, for all of us, we used to live in communities like villages, and everybody kind of worked from home because everyone worked in the village. Everyone had a role to play, no matter what. Maybe you were a hunter, a gatherer. Maybe you made baskets. Maybe you took care of some of the people in the village. I don't know. Everyone had a place, a place, and it was all at home. So maybe that's why we all want to work from home, because it's instinctual trying to get back to, in this like hyper tech world. It's just an alternate reality version of that.
Having no commute is pretty awesome too. So
what else do we got here? I'm curious about this one, man. Millennials versus the diamond industry. I've heard there's a war going on there.
I actually don't know anything about that war at all. I'd probably bet on millennials, just because I saw a thing on 60 Minutes a long time ago that says the thing about diamonds is there's no shortage of diamonds. It's all about keeping enough in the ground to keep the price high enough.
That's exactly why diamonds do not deserve to win, and I want to bet against them. Diamonds should be worthless, or they should be worth like $2 or $3 a piece. That's my final word on
girls. Girls should have all the diamonds they want at a low cost, and boys too, of course.
Yeah, of course.
But diamonds are a girl's best friend, so that's why I went with girls.
Yes. All right, man. I don't know why this. I don't want to end this on a depressing note, but I was just thinking about. We were talking about the czars in Russia, and then I was thinking about the Romanovs when they were assassinated by the Marxists. It wasn't the Bolsheviks, and it ended up taking so many bullets because there were so many diamonds sewn into their garments that it was actually acting as body armor to a certain extent. So they had to like reload several times in the firing squad.
Wow, I did not know that. I
fucked up fact, and I don't want to end on that note. And that's why I'm going to ask you the most important question of the day, Sam, and that's this. Dude, where can people find you, especially if they want to read your articles, check out your writing, everything? Where can people find you, Sam?
Well, it's really fun that I can just search Sam Ray, SAMRAY, and author, put those 3 words together, and it'll take you to my author bio page for Demcast, which will link all my current psychological articles. The one I got praised by, or the 2 I got praised by from Bandy Lee, were Narcissism is Trumpism and Trump is Flying Monkeys. Because I really go into the details of the psychology and how we are, where we are, and because the narcissism and Trumpism is basically a shortened, updated version of my book, and because my book got attacked a little bit because it was like, well, you just self-publish, and so it was like, I need to write something that really shows that my things have value, and never could I have imagined or dreamed that Bandy Lee would say nice things about it. And then on Twitter, I'm fairly active. My handle is Slippery Hero. It's one word, and it comes from a certain expression from another country. It's not me thinking I'm some slippery hero. It's something completely different, and that's sort of an inside joke. But
cool. And I will also, if you guys are on Twitter, I'll link to that. I'm currently kicked off Twitter for the time being, but they're going to let me back on eventually. And as soon as I'm back on, I will make sure that by the time this episode comes out, I should be back in the game.
It happens to the best of us.
I violated their terms of whatever, but not as bad as Marjorie Taylor Greene did. They're going to let me back on in a little bit.
Well, one time they said I violated it, and I didn't at all, but I just deleted the tweet to, get back on. So sometimes you have to do that.
Yeah. All right, Sam, it has been an absolute pleasure, man. Thanks for being on the podcast, dude.
Hey, my pleasure. We certainly went all over the place, but there's a lot of really great, important stuff that people can learn from understanding the psychology of narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths.